You know that feeling when you clock in before sunrise and you're still at your desk long after everyone else has gone home? You've said yes to every extra shift, every urgent request, every last-minute save-the-day moment. You follow the handbook to the letter. You volunteer for the hardest projects. You sacrifice weekends and sometimes your health because you believe that showing up, day in and day out, is the proof you need that you deserve more. And yet, somehow, the person who hustles half as hard, cuts corners, schmoozes the right people, and flips every rule on its head is the one getting the promotion, the raise, the corner office. You're left staring at your screen, asking yourself, what did I do wrong? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, what lie have I been told? Because somewhere along the way, probably as a kid, you learned a story. Hard work equals success, effort equals reward. Grind long enough and one day the universe will notice. The system will recognize you. You'll finally cash in on all that toil. But what if that story was never true? Worse, what if it was invented to keep you in line? Nietzsche, the German philosopher who delighted in shattering illusions, called this slave morality. He argued that glorifying obedience, sacrifice, and humility isn't some noble ideal. It's a psychological trap. Pacifies you, keeps you compliant. It convinces you that if you just endure long enough without complaint, life will eventually be just. But in his view, that moral code was forged by the powerful precisely to control those who lack power. Think about it. While you're pulling those 12-hour shifts, someone else is leveraging their relationships, their image, and their ability to bend the rules. They don't just work. They play the game of power. They manipulate perception. They own narratives. And they get rewarded for it, often far more than you, despite your superior work ethic. Take the nurse who races between patients for a 12-hour shift and gets paid barely enough to cover rent. Meanwhile, a TikToker in a rented Lamborghini hawks a get-rich-quick course and makes more in a day than that nurse earns in a month. How does that make sense? Unless the system is set up to reward control over contribution. Every story you heard about virtue being its own reward, about suffering ennobling the spirit, that was the promise used to keep you from asking, who benefits from my loyalty? Who profits from my exhaustion? You believed that patience, obedience, and sacrifice would eventually be noticed and rewarded. But Nietzsche would tell you those beliefs are the greatest chain of all. The promise of someday is the most effective shackle the powerful have ever forged. So if that moral system is rigged, what truly moves the needle? What's the overlooked currency that buys influence, opportunity, and wealth? To answer that, we need to dig into Nietzsche's distinction between two moral codes, master morality and slave morality. Master morality emerges from strength. It celebrates ambition, creativity, and the unflinching will to shape reality. It doesn't beg for permission or wait for validation. It stakes out its own value and declares, this is good. Conversely, slave morality comes from weakness. It glorifies the very traits that leave you powerless. Humility instead of boldness, obedience instead of autonomy, suffering instead of mastery. It upsides weakness into virtue because it's the only way the powerless can find dignity in a world they can't control. And here's the trap. Once slave morality takes hold, obedience feels like righteousness. Sacrifice feels sacred. Suffering feels meaningful. But meaningfulness doesn't pay the rent. Humility doesn't buy influence. Endurance doesn't generate leverage. Meanwhile, those operating under master morality aren't celebrated for quiet sacrifice. They're praised for redefining the rules, for staking new ground, for creating their own systems of value. If you're nodding along, feeling both comforted and unsettled, you're waking up. You're beginning to see that the world isn't broken. It's functioning exactly as it was designed by those who wield power. And if you want more than a pat on the back or a title that sounds impressive but leaves you without real authority, you need to rethink everything you were taught about virtue and success. Because hard work in itself is never the problem. What's dangerous is believing that hard work without strategy, without ownership, without an understanding of power, will carry you where you want to go. In the next segment, we'll explore how the just world fallacy cements that belief and how to break free from it. But for now, ask yourself, What if the labor you've been worshipping is not your salvation but your cage? And what if the path forward isn't about grinding harder, but about thinking smarter? So, you've started seeing the cracks in the sacrifice pays off story. But how did that story take root so deeply? The answer lies in a cognitive trap psychologists call the just world fallacy, the comforting illusion that effort guarantees reward, and virtue always finds its due. From kindergarten classrooms to bedtime stories, we're fed the same refrain: be good, work hard, and life will treat you fairly. It's a narrative written for compliance, not liberation. Because once you believe the world must reward hard work, you don't question your own mistreatment. You don't challenge pay gaps, unfair policies, or invisible ceilings. You just keep grinding, convinced that someday, maybe next year, maybe next promotion, you'll finally see the payoff. That promise, however, is a cruel sedative. It dulls your outrage and redirects your focus inward. What am I doing wrong? Rather than, what system is failing me? Meanwhile, the real rewards flow to those who don't wait for justice. They engineer their own leverage. Take the quietly brilliant engineer who keeps servers humming 24/7 but loses her job when the budget shrinks. Her moral labor earns her respect, but no real power. And then consider the reputation manager who schmoozes executives, frames narratives, and courts influencers. He wasn't even in the data center on crunch day, yet he walks into the boardroom next quarter with a raise. Which outcome seems more surprising once you see how the system works? The system is rigged to favor scale and control over sweat equity. Anyone can endure 12-hour shifts, but only those who control capital, networks, or narratives can move markets, shape opinions, or rewrite rules. Physical labor creates value, but it can't own the means of production. It can only feed it. Meanwhile, ideas, influence, and assets are infinitely replicable. One tweet can echo across the globe. One contract can shift millions. That's the domain of the few who understand power as their true currency. Nietzsche called this split between two moral codes master morality and slave morality. We've already seen how slave morality glorifies obedience and suffering. But master morality, the code of creators and architects, doesn't worship sacrifice. It worships creativity, courage, and the will to define good on one's own terms. It says, I don't wait for someone else to reward me. I build my own table. That's where the concept of the Übermensch or Overman comes in. This isn't a call to tyranny or cruelty, but to authorship. The Übermensch doesn't petition the system for recognition. He crafts a world where his recognition is self-evident. He doesn't bend himself to existing rules. He forges new ones. He understands that if he's going to live by his own values, he must also claim the power to enforce them. You've seen Übermensch-type figures everywhere. People who walked away from security to pursue a vision. The founder who left a cushy corporate role to bootstrap a startup that changed an industry. The creative who ditched convention to build a personal brand with millions of followers. The investor who turned rejection letters into opportunities by flipping the script on the gatekeepers. Their common trait isn't sheer genius, it's the mindset. They didn't wait to be invited into the game. They built their own arena. So, if you're waking up to the lie of moral labor, the next question is obvious. What does power look like, and how do I claim it without losing myself? Because rejecting slave morality doesn't mean embracing ruthless self-interest. It means recognizing that strategy and ethics aren't enemies, but partners. It means using kindness with intention, setting clear boundaries, negotiating from strength, and saying no when yes no longer serves your mission. In the final segment, we'll dive into concrete ways to dismantle the just world fallacy in your own life. We'll explore how to spot the levers of influence, how to cultivate strategic kindness, and how to begin writing your own rules without surrendering your integrity. Because true freedom isn't about leaving morality behind. It's about reclaiming it as your compass, rather than your cage. I plan to deliver this script in 3 parts. Would you like me to go ahead with Part 3, the final section? De Sui Gi Trong 8 Part 3. So you've seen how the just world story keeps you trapped, how slave morality pacifies your outrage and redirects your focus inward. Now let's talk about concrete steps you can take to reclaim your agency without sacrificing your integrity. Audit your beliefs. Grab a notebook and list every rule you've internalized about sacrifice. If I work harder, I'll be rewarded. Good people don't rock the boat. Waiting patiently proves my worth. Next to each ask, who benefits if I keep believing this? Who profits from my obedience? Odds are, the system designers you'll never meet have been feeding you these stories. Once you see them as narratives, rather than immutable truths, you're free to rewrite them. Map your levers of influence. Power isn't magic. It's leverage. It lives in capital, networks, expertise, platforms, and narrative control. Identify where you already hold sway. Do you oversee a process no one else understands? Are you a natural connector in your team? Do you cultivate a unique skill or viewpoint? Write down every asset you control, no matter how small. Then brainstorm, how could each become a source of scale? Could your process expertise be turned into a workshop you lead? Could your network yield joint ventures? Could your unique perspective fuel a newsletter or podcast? Practice strategic kindness. Kindness isn't weakness, it's a tool, but it must be dispensed with intention. Before you say yes, pause and ask, does this align with my goals? Does it build goodwill in a community that could amplify my influence? If the answer is no, learn to say no without guilt. When you do say yes, make it count. Over-deliver, share credit, build real relationships. These deposits will earn you support when you need it most. Negotiate from strength. Every collaboration, every role, every contract is negotiable if you approach it strategically. Frame negotiations around the value you bring, not the hours you'll log. Prepare by researching market rates, gathering testimonials, and articulating your unique impact. Remember, walking away respectfully is often the strongest signal you can send. It shows you're not dependent on any single opportunity. Build your own arena. The Ubermensch doesn't wait for a seat at someone else's table. He builds his own table. That might mean launching a side project, creating a personal brand, founding a community, or investing in a passion that aligns with your values. Treat this arena as your laboratory. Experiment, iterate, learn. Every failure is data. Every connection is a potential collaborator or champion. Align ethics and strategy. Rejecting slave morality doesn't mean embracing cynicism. It means treating your moral compass as a guiding star, not a prison. Define the values that matter most to you: integrity, generosity, curiosity, and use them to set guardrails around your strategic moves. When you're clear on both your why and your how, you wield power as a tool for creation, not as a trophy on the shelf. Hard work alone won't set you free, but insight, intention, and strategy will. By dismantling the just world fallacy, mapping your levers of influence, and practicing strategic kindness, you stop being a cog in someone else's machine and become the architect of your own life. So if you're ready to stop waiting for someday and start defining your own terms, hit subscribe. Because here, we don't just explain the world, we give you the tools to reshape your destiny, one idea at a time.